did not have the votes to pass the original version, but council also was not ready to completely shut the door on the initiative.
When we want to get a quick win, sometimes we miss the comprehensive packaging of that so it works for all parties across the community. How do you build a partnership for a fairly complex program broadly across sectors, but also within council?
The more charitable reading of this is that he's trying to move the discussion forward in order to compromise.
Hello London, I'm Matt Brown and you're listening to the Matt Brown Podcast. It's a show about all things local and maybe some other stuff too. Today, community leaders Mojdeh, Azad and Paul Hubert are joining me to talk about the Mayor's Home Ownership Incentive Plan. He called it his big announcement at the London Chamber of Commerce State of the City address held back in January. He used what are called strong mayor powers to direct staff to develop the plan quickly, and since that time the idea has received a bit of a rough ride from many of London's other 14 members of council. It left a lot of us wondering what might happen next. Well, I'm going to tell you all about it right after this.
Discover London Bicycle Cafe. It's the perfect time of year to take a break on their spacious patio, featuring craft beer, espresso drinks, snacks, meals, and more. London Bicycle Cafe at the Forks of the Thames. See you soon.
Back in January, the mayor used his strong mayor powers to direct staff to develop what he called an affordable home ownership incentive plan. Essentially, and it is more complicated than this, but the plan could provide approximately 260 individuals and families who purchase a newly built home within a certain time frame with the equivalent of a $20,000 to just over $50,000 rebate. And this depends on the size of the home. Think of a small apartment all the way up to a single family home and everything in between. All of these homes have to be sold for less than $630,000 as well, because that price point is what's considered to be at or below the average of prices for homes these days in London. What does this $20,000 to $50,000 rebate represent? It represents development charges, or DCs. These are the fees that developers normally pay to cover the capital costs associated with the cost of a growing city. Think of things like water and wastewater, roads, parks, transit, emergency services, libraries, and more. These development charges are then typically included in the purchase price of new builds. So that allows existing taxpayers to avoid paying and subsidizing growth. In other words, growth then pays for growth. Now, how would this incentive work? The mayor's original plan suggested that council use city funds sourced from a federal government grant to provide 60% of this discount, and developers would then incorporate and deduct the remaining 40% of these costs at the time of sale. The city would front a total of $5 million for its share, and keep in mind this is one-time funding, so once the money is gone, it's gone and the program is over. That was the original idea. Back in February, it came before council. And they had a lot of questions when it came forward for their review. After a long debate, they sent these questions back and the whole program to staff for additional information. About a week ago, they got their answers at the Committee of the Whole. And then, largely at the mayor's request, they sent the plan back a second time, this time looking for even more options to consider. Council will likely get their second round of questions answered, as well as a new series of options to consider from staff near the tail end of April. These options will include the original plan, some potential changes related to how and when the rebate would be applied, as well as a potential granting program to provide a mechanism that incentivizes residents adding an additional rental unit to their home. Think of a basement apartment, for example. So, where does all of this go? We'll just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, we're joined by Mojdeh Azad, an award-winning consultant, a convener, and a facilitator, and Paul Hubert. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Pathways, and he's the founder of Delta Leadership Consulting. They're here to help us make sense of what's going on and what might be coming in the weeks and months ahead. So let's go. Mojdeh, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to be here.
It's great to be anywhere these days, isn't it, Paul?
It is.
Mojdeh, I covered the background in the intro, so let's jump right in. From your perspective, what's going on?
Well, the original model used $5 million in federal housing accelerator fund money for the city's 60% share of development charge relief. And council, to me, flagged unanswered questions about things like that were valid, like eligibility, repayment terms, down payment support, and overall effectiveness. London also already has a separate down payment assistance program for moderate income renters. So while the city's own 2025 development report shows most new growth is in higher density housing, not detached homes, I can see where council would be navigating some of their questions. What I think is going on here is that council is not rejecting home ownership as a goal, but it is questioning whether this is the smartest use of public money. And, this was a one-time $5 million municipal contribution tied to those federal housing dollars. It was designed to help a relatively small number of buyers. And quite frankly, in newly built homes, which seem, I think, talking in the community, Paul, you and I probably crossed paths saying this in the past, that it's targeting housing prices that aren't really realistic. An average home right now isn't going to fall under the threshold of what this program is built around. So, it's designed to help a relatively small number of buyers in new homes that are not within the scope of what people can afford, let alone the availability of houses around that pricing mark. Yeah. Council's hesitation tells me that they're asking a fair question. Does this truly improve affordability, or does it mostly subsidize purchases that were already going to happen?
Yeah, and
people
and
were
enough.
Already on that path.
Right, fair enough. And I think what you're saying is that they're doing their due diligence. This is an announcement that was, had a lot of fanfare, and when it came to them, they had a lot of questions.
That's
Paul,
right.
Paul, what about you?
Well, I think you have to step back from the whole program and the nuts and bolts, and council rightly got into the nuts and bolts. But I step back and say, why? And there's some good reasons why. The mayor makes the point that we need to spend this money, we need to achieve targets from the accelerator fund, or there might be 20 million bucks that doesn't come to the municipality, and that makes a lot of sense as well. Then you've got the home builders saying that they've said publicly that we've got inventory that's not moving, and we need to get rid of that, and we need to help our building sector and home builders. That raises a whole other series of questions that I don't think council has actually asked in terms of are we boosting the profits of private sector? Why that sector, not another sector? There's those sorts of sort of business problems and questions. And then I think there's the third element here is it was an announcement with fanfare, but it also leads to the question of how do you build a partnership for a fairly complex program broadly across sectors, but also within council and within the administration. So it leaves me asking a few questions around that and how the mayor was thinking about it. I'll give him marks for, hey, I'm going to try something, and good for him to try something, but is that the right something, and did it roll out in the right way?
Okay, and I think that's an interesting take on this as well. It is interesting that when the idea came forward back in February, council had an opportunity to consider it. They didn't support the idea, but they didn't vote the idea down either.
No,
they sent it back for additional information that came forward just this past week. Paul, what do you make of that?
Well, the easiest decision of councils, and you and I both know this, is refer back. So kick the decision down the road for whether it be for political reasons or just delay. So that's, I'm not a big fan of refer back. But I also think there was an opportunity between the first announcement and it coming back this week for the mayor to have really gotten his colleagues on side and to build a coalition of the willing, if you will, on this one, and he doesn't seem to have gotten there yet.
Well, and let's go there next. I want to hear what you have to say, Mojdeh.
For sure, thank you. I do agree. The 12-3 referral after an extensive debate tells me the mayor did not have the votes to pass the original version, but council also was not ready to completely shut the door on the initiative. And so it gives me a little bit of hope that there may be some common ground that they'll land on soon enough. They chose the middle route to set it back and ask for staff for other options, and I don't think that that's a particularly bad idea. It does force a political reset. I mean, between the lines, that means council liked the urgency of the housing conversation, but not enough members were convinced that this is the particular vehicle to travel in right now. When council sends something back instead of approving it, that usually means members are not comfortable with owning the policy in its current form, right? And so to me, that was council saying we're not really prepared to rubber stamp a headline, bring us something a little tighter. And this is, when I say a headline, I don't mean that the mayor was off track in intention. I mean, that's kind of hard to gauge from outside. I'm not really interested in that intention. Where it landed was that it seemed like it was a bit of a surprise to a few folks. Though there wasn't any deep objection from the home builders. From his perspective, when I hear him speak on this issue, it wasn't that there was a lot of alignment or even consultation around this. So that's what kind of gets me a little concerned. And as we progress in this conversation, we'll probably touch on the other elements of surprise.
Yeah, I think we're gonna dig a little bit deeper. But you raise a really good point that in an election year, you want to be seen doing the right thing. You definitely do not want to be seen doing the wrong thing. And there's a saying that success has 1,000 parents and failure has one. And so I think that you really nailed that point very clearly. And I think also a person doesn't really want to be seen voting against a housing initiative. Paul?
Yeah. So to vote against housing is, in this current environment, is a bit of a third rail. We want to have housing. We want to have more housing. We want to have affordable housing. We want to make housing affordable. And even the provinces and the feds are looking at how do we pull off sales tax off of HST, off of home purchase. I think one of the things that I have not heard is how does all of these various initiatives work together? What's the whole package? What would a sales tax plan, how would this work? How does it impact? And some of the constraints that council is putting on, I mean, you cannot constrain someone to, oh, you can't sell your house for 10 years. Well, I don't know where I'm gonna be 10 years from now. Like how do you control human behavior? Was there consultation with organizations like Habitat for Humanity? How could that be? But so, one of the things that happens is when we want to get a quick win, sometimes we miss the comprehensive packaging of that so it works for all parties across the community.
Yeah, and governments, I think, often get themselves into trouble when they try and do something quickly and try and get results sooner rather than later. Paul touched on a point that, Mojdeh, I want to go to you for, which is the province just announced a significant announcement, a 13% basically rebate on houses in Ontario from April 1st, 2026, all the way through to April 1st, 2027. So we're talking about a 13% reduction in the cost of a new home. How do you compare that to a program like this?
Well, I think that this is, coming from a municipal level, I have to say that they're taking a piece of the ownership of the housing issue that we're experiencing nationally and making it their own and trying to solve it. So I want to say that there is a place and a space for all levels of government to put in what they can. I don't know if they're quite comparable in the sense of the way that this information is being translated to us right now. For sure, the announcement that we just heard reaches more people. It alleviates a lot of financial strain, particularly for first-time home buyers who are already really stressed about this big investment and commitment that they're about to make. Once again, I'll go back to what I had said earlier. Both of these initiatives look like they're going to alleviate financial strain for deals and transactions that were already going to happen.
Right.
And so if we're looking at the disparity in the housing market where people are underhoused, not sufficiently housed, unhoused, and cannot afford to work their 40-hour job, possibly another part-time job on top of that, and still meet their housing expense needs. Those are who are in fact the majority of our population. Will either of these programs touch them?
Well, it's a good question. We're just coming up to our break, so we're going to have to leave it there, but we will go back to that. Also, after the break, I'd like to talk about what happened this week at the opportunity when Council saw what was coming forward from staff, the information, the questions they had were being answered. The first person to make a referral back was the mayor. I found that pretty interesting.
Discover London Bicycle Cafe, home of family cargo and urban cycling. Test ride an e-bike along riverside trails to see how easy moving through our city can really be. London Bicycle Cafe at the Forks of the Thames. See you soon.
Okay, we're back. And as I had said, just as we closed off that first segment, that something really interesting happened at the most recent Committee of the Whole when Council was coming forward to consider the information that they received from staff and consider the program that the mayor developed with his strong mayor powers. It was referred back. But what surprised me was that it was the mayor that was moving that referral. Mojdeh, what did you think of that?
Well, I think he did this because he understood that this proposal was in trouble, and he didn't want perhaps the whole conversation to collapse on a single model. I do believe there's a little bit of who gets in front of putting in new models around this idea, and I'll make a point on this, I hope a little later in the conversation when it's more appropriate. The city's own summary shows that council has already flagged these unresolved concerns about how this program would work, and recent report says that the mayor is now looking for alternative models that council can support and work with. So between the lines, this looks like an effort to regain a little bit of control. As I mentioned, there might be some, and to show a little flexibility. That I do believe that this is a bit of a, political execution on the mayor's front to his right. This is his role, and it is an election year. I mean, the more charitable reading of this is that he's trying to move the discussion forward in order to compromise. The more critical reading would be that he's trying to get ahead of the council and reset the frame before members fully worked through the staff analysis and sort of be ahead of what could be the new proposed measures to consider for this model. Either way, community accountability matters here. We're dealing with public dollars, and residents should expect council to slow things down enough to ask who really benefits, how targeted is this, or how broad is this, and is this the best use of the limited housing money?
Right, and you know what, I mean, fair enough. I'm sure every member of council came prepared to debate the information that was provided to them from staff, and before the opportunity was available for them to do that, a new motion was brought forward in a referral back. Paul, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm going to be maybe more direct on it. I think this was the mayor's golden egg. It was his big announcement, and he referred it back to protect it, because if it failed and was defeated, his major announcement just got slapped down, and that would be not very good politically for him. And this is one of the risks of the strong mayor powers is, and I think mayors across the province are actually still trying to find their way on this, is you can, I have a saying, you're only a leader if people are actually following you. And so you can be the leader of council and the head of council, but if you don't have at least those other 8 votes to get you across the line, then you really aren't leading. And I say that with the greatest respect for the mayor, know him well, but I think it was a protective measure and a politically protective measure. He wants to be seen as having impact, and I applaud him for that. But that's why he had to get out in front. That's why he had to refer it back, or it could have died.
Right, sure. And so let's go there next. Strong mayor powers are still relatively new powers that are available here in municipalities in Ontario. For folks at home, that means that a mayor can come forward with an initiative. They can direct staff without going to council first and get things moving really quickly. There are some appeal processes where a supermajority of council can object, and then the strong mayor powers are superseded by council. But it's a significant change from a weak mayor system where every member of the 15-member council had a single vote, and there was a little bit more collaboration. I want to say one thing. During the debate over this motion, I watched the whole thing, and council really was working closely together. And then right after the debate, the very next day, I was listening to the radio, and the mayor was being interviewed on CBC, and he indicated that he had to make this change because council was taking too long with its decision. What do you think of that? And what do you think of strong mayor powers, Mojdeh?
Well, I did hear on CBC that the mayor at this point is saying that he did not want to proceed with flexing the full powers of the strong mayor powers because of the lack of consensus on this. And I applaud him for seeing and redirecting his path and ensuring that he does this in a good way. On the note of taking too long, I think if council is being told or it's being said that council is taking too long, then it's fair to ask what consultation, as I mentioned, market testing and policy vetting informed the original announcement. So if we're not going from headline to presumed policy and let's just toe the line, these are the questions that we have to ask. Because when a proposal involving a public dollars gets sent back once and then and then reopened again with new options, that suggests that council is doing the policy work that should make a proposal durable and defensible. To me, this means there's tension between political urgency and democratic oversight, to be honest with you. And I understand the desire to move quickly on housing, but when, again, I don't want to keep talking about the dollars. When public money and lack of consultation is entangled into an announcement, which is then received in a way that is, I think both folks were receptive and curious, but also critical, ensuring that the right questions are asked and the right markers are addressed. I think it raises concerns truly about, are we trying to go fast and furious, or are we trying to be fair and able to compromise and be flexible?
It really is a balance. I mean, there's a saying that overanalysis can lead to paralysis, and there's another saying that says you want to be on the cutting edge of an idea, but you don't want to be on the bleeding edge of an idea. Paul, what about you?
You know, whenever you get someone who wants to move quickly forward, and this is not about Josh, this is just a general social, you can tend towards being authoritarian. And then when you're authoritarian, you sometimes don't hear all the feedback, which leads us to something that's called groupthink, and which is bad decision making, bad policy, and sometimes some very detrimental effects. So one of the things prior to strong mayors that was so critical for mayors is the ability to build consensus. And consensus isn't just at council. Consensus is within the community. So that there's a broad-based buy-in to something, and we've considered all of the options. I get it. We you don't want to lose out on this $5 million or the next $20 million. So I get where the mayor's coming from on that. But you have to be working really hard to build the consensus so that these questions are answered. So you give your colleagues at council something they can say yes to.
Okay, I've only got a minute left for each of you. Where do we go from here, Mojdeh?
I think there's an opportunity here, but only if this becomes less about defending the original announcement and more about finding a model a majority can actually stand behind. The latest reporting suggests that where it is heading, where this is heading now is in that direction. We're hoping to kind of iron out those wrinkles. So what happens next is, I think this is a real test. Like, can council and the mayor move forward from a sort of branded idea to a workable compromise? And I'll have to say, Harry Truman and I are not natural political soulmates, but he got this one right when he said it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care about who gets the credit. And that is really the test here, less of the focus on who owns the headline and more focus on building something London can move forward with and together. And this isn't a jab at the mayor and his team, the advisors and everyone that he's working with, or council, about whatever they're feeling in the moment.
Yeah, and for sure, I think that's really important, for us to consider. Paul, you've got your minute, and then we're out of time.
I love that quote by Harry Truman. I think that's.
Are you political soulmates?
I'm not even going to go down that road. But I would say that that's a really good perspective. I think this one needs to go back. You put some of the brightest heads in the city in a room, and you say, okay, here's the pieces of the puzzle. Yeah. Let's throw it on the table. And how do we put it? The puzzle isn't going to look the same way as it originally did. But how do we put it together in such a way that it works for the largest number of people in the most flexible and agile way, and impacts not just people trying to get into the housing market, but also the home builders and the construction industry in our community? And how does that fit also with the other programs that are either available currently or in the offing, like the sales tax?
Exactly. And there is great possibility that something's going to come forward. We're going to find out what that is near the end of April when this comes back to council. And maybe we should get together again at that point too to hash that one out as well. And that's the show. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you know a little bit more about one of the bigger issues that's taking place down at City Hall as the city prepares for an election scheduled for this fall. Thanks to Mojdeh and Paul for joining us today, and thank you for listening too. Like I always say, this show is for you. In fact, we couldn't do it without you. So please keep in touch. You can write to the Matt Brown Podcast at gmail.com. You can tell us what you think. You can maybe suggest a future episode, or you can even just write in and say hi. It's great to have those conversations and those back and forths. Thanks to everyone who's already reaching out these days too. And that's the show. I'm Matt Brown, and this is the Matt Brown Podcast. It's the show about all things local and maybe some other stuff too. As always, thanks for listening. Bye for now, and talk to you again soon, London.